Hello, my name is Tammy Demirza, and thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk to you about painting, believe it or not. When I was in France studying with one of the most famous trompe-l'oeil artists alive, I learned a lot about life. I was actually challenged in many ways because I could not speak the language. I could not talk with the French. Not that they wanted to talk with me, but it was a very interesting time. One of the things that I learned was at the very start of the class, we started painting pine on these big, long panels. The very first thing we did was to paint a very simple pine plank, and that was easy. And even though everything that I did during that time looked like it would be a challenge, we were able to do that one quite simply. And then the next pine tree plank that we painted on a big panel had a knot in it. And that was a little bit more challenging, but not so much. And so we got finished with that one. And then the third one that he did was one that had all kinds of curves and knots and twists and turns in it. And I was looking at the three panels after we got finished painting them, and I was wondering what made the third the most attractive to me. It was distorted, it was twisted, it was constantly swerving and moving, and there were no straight lines in it at all whatsoever. And as the artist started to explain why the simplest of pine trees looked different with the one with the knot, and then the third one, which had the most movement going on in it, to me was the most beautiful, the most striking. And as he started to explain why and what nature did to the different trees, I started to understand why it was so attractive to me. The first one was very simple and did not have a very difficult life as a tree. There was no real wind that was tossing it about or moving it about. It was just growing straight up. As you know, pine trees do not have very deep roots. So sometimes when they mature and they're grown up, they can be tossed over by the wind or weather. In the case of the one that we were painting, the very first one, there was no real movement. There was just simplicity. It was a very simple life for that tree. It wasn't difficult. When you got into where the knots were, something had occurred in the life of that tree that created that knot. But if you look at the characteristics and the value in being able to look at trees, or the tree limbs or the trunks or the tables and the furniture that people make, they're always looking for something that actually has a lot of character in it. So the knot in the tree, the second one that we painted, had a little bit more of an interest to it. It didn't have a simple life. It had something happen to it. Could be a growth. It could have been a fungus. It could have been something else. The third one that was the most striking to me and the most beautiful was the one that had been tormented in its life. This is the one that was constantly having to reshape itself, remold itself, rework itself, figure out ways to survive. Because of weather, because of the elements, because of temperature, because of damage, because of twists and turns in the climate system, because of things happening, trees falling against it, all kinds of issues. But guess what? That was the most beautiful. And when this famous artist started explaining this to us, I was actually crying because I realized that and I'll start crying again, I, in my life, must be awfully beautiful because of all of the twists and turns and the things that has occurred in my life. And if you could see me from the inside and you could see how my spirit, my tenacity, my willingness to grow, my ability to say, okay, this happened to me. I made these choices. I even made some really awful choices that I ended up paying for. As some of you know from reading my book, I was actually homeless for a couple of years. And what you see behind me is part of my life and part of the manifestation of getting it back. As a matter of fact, this painting that you see behind me is one of my paintings. And I was able to take that with me. I painted it before I became homeless. So the point to this story is that if you are living a very simple life, you're not going to have very many marks and scars. But that's not typically what life is, because we come here to experience pain and suffering. But if you could see the characteristics and the value, such as what wood does, and the wood grain, and the most beautiful pieces of furniture are the ones that have been through a lot in the life of the tree. So if you can look at your life as I do mine and say, I'm actually quite beautiful. I'm not worried about the decisions that I made in the past. It makes me effervescent. It makes me have character. It makes me much more attractive to people who know that to overcome something, to live through it, to still be standing after everything that I have been through and you have been through. You are quite beautiful. The more movement that you have in your life, the more turmoil, the more trauma, the more drama that you have overcome, and you come out on the other side, you become the most beautiful piece of art here in humanity. So for those of you who have lived like me, who have had traumatic lives, a lot to overcome, a lot to deal with, a lot to look through, take courage in knowing that you are becoming beautiful. The lotus in the muck and the mire becomes a beautiful plant in the midst of living in nothing but trashy water. And it's resilient, and it's powerful, and it's strong. And lotus leaves are quite large. They're very big, and they're amazing. And I love the look of the lotus plants. That is also symbolic of us. Another illustration of this is Cinderella. I've always known that I was like the stepchild that didn't really belong in families, in my family specifically. And yet I have become a sort of princess, if you will, as far as being able to overcome the worst of the worst in order to be able to sit in front of you today and say, it's worth it. Growth is the reason that we're here. Growth is the reason that we contractually, through things in the non-spiritual world, non-physical world that you don't even know, you are agreeing to go through. It is all for the purpose of you coming out on the other side. So be the twisted piece of wood. Be Cinderella. Be the lotus that comes out of the muck and the mire. I hope you find courage in this today. And I hope you know that every single one of us come here to experience the worst and the best, the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, the pain and the joy, the sickness and the health. The point is to get to the point to where you are looking at, how do I overcome this, instead of just staying in the mire of it and feeling like you're a victim. You are not a victim, and there's not one of you that has gone through anything that does not have the strength and the power within to overcome it. Namaste.